In the Emma streets of New York, where lights never sleep, a girl named Emma walked barefoot through the cold, her hair tangled, her eyes silent, but her heart still beating with a rhythm only she could hear. She sang to the air, and to the empty walls, and to the people who never turned their heads. Her voice was soft, broken, pure, and every note came from a wound that never healed. She sat near the subway stairs every evening, holding an old paper cup, her fingers trembling, her song echoing against the steel. Her world was made of hunger, cold, and silence, but her soul was made of music. One night, a young man named Adam stopped by. He had a coffee cup in his hand and tired eyes from working 2 jobs. But when he heard her voice, he forgot where he was. He just stood still, as if time had stopped. When the song ended, she looked at him, expecting a coin, but he said only words that changed everything. You don't sing for money, you sing because you are alive. Emma looked down and whispered, "Nobody listens to the poor." Adam smiled. Maybe the poor have the most beautiful stories. From that night, he came every day, sometimes with food, sometimes with nothing but a smile. She started to wait for him, though she never said it. Her heart began to wake up after years of being numb. One day, he brought his old friend Ryan, a music producer who had lost his career after being betrayed by a record label. He listened to Emma and closed his eyes. He felt tears rise because he heard truth. They recorded her voice on a cheap phone. The sound was raw and imperfect, but full of soul. They uploaded it online and forgot about it, but the world didn't forget. By morning, her voice had reached millions, her face on screens, her name on lips, strangers crying over her pain. She became the girl from the streets who sang her way into hearts. Money started to come, fame, lights, contracts. People who had never known her before now wanted to own her. She moved into a small apartment, her first door, her first bed, her first warm shower. She cried that night because she could finally sleep inside walls, but every blessing carried a shadow. Interviews became noise. Managers told her how to look, what to sing, who to be. Ryan warned her, the world will make you rich, but take away your truth. But she didn't listen at first. She thought success meant safety until she saw the same hunger in richer clothes. Adam stayed beside her, holding her together when the pressure broke her pieces. One night, while driving to a show, Ryan met an accident and never came back. Emma's world went silent. She locked herself away for weeks, her piano untouched, her songs forgotten. She looked at the mirror and didn't recognize the girl who stared back. Fame had stolen the street singer who sang for life. Adam tried to reach her, but she only said, "I can't sing anymore. The world took everything I had." One evening, she found Ryan's notebook. Inside it were his last words, "The world doesn't need perfect songs, it needs honest ones." She broke down, cried until dawn, then stood up, walked barefoot to the same street corner where it all began. People passed by not knowing who she was. She placed her old paper cup on the ground, closed her eyes, and began to sing again. This time there were no lights, no cameras, no fame, only the sound of her heart bleeding into the night. Her voice trembled through the wind. People started to stop one by one. Her song reached the same depth it had years ago, and somewhere deep inside, she felt Ryan's spirit listening. When she finished, she whispered, "This is for you." The next week, she returned to the stage, the biggest concert of her life. Thousands of people, silent, lights dimmed. She took a deep breath and sang, not to impress, but to heal. Every note carried her journey, hunger, pain, love, lost, truth. The audience began to cry because they could feel that she was singing from a place money could never reach. When she finished, the hall erupted in applause, but she just stood there, tears falling. She smiled, looked up, and whispered, "Thank you, Ryan, thank you, Adam, thank you, pain that made me sing again." Later that night, she walked home quietly, no guards, no cameras. She opened the window, placed her old paper cup there, and watched the city lights below. She whispered softly, "People don't drop coins anymore, they drop love, and that's the only wealth I ever wanted." And then she sat near the window, the same melody on her lips, the same gentle heartbeat inside her chest. The same city that once ignored her now breathing with her song. Her voice became eternal, floating in the air of New York through every lonely night, reminding everyone who listened that pain is not the end, it is teach. And the night kept moving slowly over the city lights, and Emma sat near her window, her eyes lost in the glowing skyline. Her fingers touched the rim of that same old cup, the only thing she had when she had nothing. She smiled faintly, because now the same world that once ignored her was whispering her songs in every home, every car, every heart. Yet deep inside, she still felt an emptiness, a quiet space that even success could not fill. She missed Ryan's laughter, she missed Adam's gentle silence, she missed the streets that once held her tears, she missed the sound of struggle because it had kept her alive. She began to walk through the city again, not as a star, but as a soul looking for truth. She met children singing on corners just like she once did. She gave them food, gave them guitars, told them never to give up. One small girl asked her, "Why do you still sing if you have everything?" Emma smiled and said, "Because if I stop singing, I'll lose myself again." The little girl hugged her and whispered. Then never stop. Days turned into months. Emma built a small foundation for homeless singers, people with dreams, but no voice. She used her money not for fame, but for freedom. She called it Ryan's Voice. Every week, she would visit shelters and record people's songs. The world began to change. A little hope began to grow. Where once there was silence, one evening she returned to that subway corner. One last time. It was raining, the ground wet with memories. She stood there barefoot again, the wind cold against her face. She closed her eyes and sang her first song, the one she sang when Adam found her years ago. Her voice carried through the tunnels, across the streets, up the tall buildings, into the sky, where maybe Ryan could still hear her. Adam arrived quietly, stood at a distance, his eyes wet with pride. He didn't interrupt, he just listened. When the song ended, she looked at him and smiled softly. "You were right," she said. "I sang for the world, and the world finally listened." Adam stepped closer, held her hand, and said, "No, the world didn't listen to you, it felt you." That night the rain kept falling, the city kept breathing, and somewhere in that moment time stood still. Two souls who had known hunger, pain, and loss stood together, not as broken people, but as proof that beauty can rise from the dirt. Emma leaned her head on his shoulder and whispered, "I used to think money could save me, but it was love that made me rich." Adam smiled and said, "And it was pain that made your voice eternal." They walked away slowly through the rain, disappearing into the city lights, the echoes of her song fading softly behind them. But every night, even years later, when the wind moved through New York, you could still hear her melody floating through the air. A voice that once begged for coins, now healing hearts across the world. A song born from hunger turned into a hymn of hope. And in every corner of the city, people whispered her name, Emma, the girl who sang her way out of silence, the girl who turned pain into love, the girl who reminded the world that the poorest hearts can create the richest songs. Years passed, and the city changed. New towers rose, new faces walked the same streets, but some things never faded. Among them was the sound of Emma's songs that still echoed from small speakers in cafes, taxis, and late-night radio shows. Her foundation, Ryan's Voice, had grown beyond anything she imagined. It became a global movement, helping young singers who had nothing but dreams. Every month, she would travel to small towns to meet those who sang not for fame but for survival, people who poured their pain into melody. One evening in Los Angeles, a girl named Lily came to her. She was trembling, holding a broken guitar. She said, "I know your story. I sing your song every night when I'm alone. It keeps me alive." Emma looked at her and saw herself years ago, sitting in the cold rain with a paper cup. She smiled and said, "Then sing it for the world." Lily's voice shook at first, then it soared, pure and wild, just like Emma's once had. Emma recorded it and uploaded it with the caption, "The Next Voice of Hope." Within days, it spread across the internet. Millions watched, millions cried, because they saw in Lily the same fire they had once seen in Emma. And so the circle began again. Emma watched in silence, tears in her eyes, not from sadness, but from knowing that the music would never die. She often sat alone on the balcony of her house, overlooking the ocean, her hair gray, now her hands wrinkled by time, but her eyes still full of that same gentle light. Adam still by her side, their bond unbroken. He ran the charity accounts, handled the work she could no longer do. Sometimes at night, he would bring an old record player, and they would listen to Ryan's recordings as laughter his unfinished songs. Emma would whisper, "I wish he could see what his dream became." Adam would reply, "He does every time you sing. The world hears him through you." One quiet morning, Emma woke up before dawn, the air cool and calm. She walked to the beach barefoot, her steps slow, the sky turning golden. She stood at the edge of the water, closed her eyes, and began to hum softly. The waves carried her melody far into the distance, as if the sea itself was singing back. Her voice merged with the wind until it was impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. Later that day, she wrote her final words in a notebook. "Music saved me not because it made me famous, but because it made me feel alive. It taught me that pain is a teacher and love is a reward for surviving it." She left the notebook on the piano beside Ryan's photo and her old paper cup, a symbol of where it all began. Years later, that same piano would be placed in a museum with a small plaque that read, "Emma, the voice of truth." Visitors from all over the world came to see it, to touch the cup, to feel the silence that once turned into song. And somewhere outside on the streets of New York, a little boy sang her song for a few coins, his voice raw, full of hope, just like hers once was. And as people passed by, one old man stopped and listened. He smiled, dropped $1 in the cup, and whispered, "Keep singing, kid, the world might need your voice." Next, the boy looked up, smiled, and sang louder, as if the city itself was alive again. And through the noise of cars and footsteps, the faint sound of Emma's melody drifted through the wind, timeless, eternal, and full of love. And the sun began to set behind the tall glass towers, painting the city in gold and amber, the streets alive with the sound of footsteps, laughter, horns. And somewhere beneath all that noise, a faint melody floated through the wind. It was the same melody that Emma had once sung on the cold concrete years ago. Now it belonged to the world. Children hummed it in schools, old men played it on violins at street corners, and lovers whispered its tune on quiet nights. It had become more than a song. It was a memory, a pulse, a heartbeat of everyone who had ever felt pain and still chosen to hope. Adam, now old, sat on a park bench watching the world move, his eyes warm with peace. Sometimes he thought he could still hear her voice calling him through the breeze. She had passed away quietly one morning, her last breath gentle like her music. The news spread across the world. People lit candles on streets, sang her songs, played her videos, cried as if they had lost someone they knew personally, because in truth, Emma had lived inside their hearts. Adam visited her resting place every Sunday, bringing white roses. He would sit for hours talking to her as if she were still there. One day, he placed a small note beside her name. It said, "You sang for the world, and now the world sings for you." Years later, her foundation opened a music academy for orphans, the first of its kind, named the House of Song, built near the same subway where she once sang. A statue of her stood there, barefoot, microphone in hand, head tilted toward the sky. The plaque read, "She taught us that pain is not a curse, but a song waiting to be sung." And when the wind blew through the city, her melody played softly from hidden speakers, filling the air with her memory. People stopped, listened, smiled, sometimes cried, and then walked on, feeling lighter, freer, alive. And among them, a little girl held her mother's hand and asked, "Who is she?" Her mother smiled and said she was the girl who taught the world to listen. And that night, in a small room somewhere, the little girl picked up her guitar, strummed softly, and whispered, "This one is for you, Emma." And the music began again, flowing endlessly through hearts, through generations, through time itself, never fading, never dying, because true voices never do. And even when the world changes, when cities fall and new ones rise, somewhere in the wind, someone will always be singing her song, a song born from hunger, forged by pain, carried by love, and remembered by the soul of humanity forever. And the years kept rolling like quiet waves across the ocean of time. The city that once ignored her now celebrated her every year. On the same day when Emma first sang in the subway, the streets of New York would fill with music. People from every corner gathered, their children with guitars, women with violins, men with drums, all singing the same song that once came from a girl who had nothing but a paper cup and a dream. It became a festival called the Day of Voices, a celebration of truth and hope. Lights covered the old subway walls, portraits of Emma hung across the streets, candles flickered near her statue, and people sang together as if her soul still danced among them. Adam, now frail, sat near the statue. Every year, watching the faces glow under the streetlights, he would close his eyes and imagine her there singing softly, like before he could almost hear her voice whisper through the wind, saying thank you for believing when no one else did one night. After the festival ended, Adam went home to his small apartment, filled with memories. The same old record player sat near the window, her notebook still open, her last words fading slightly with time. He sat down, smiled at the stars, and said, "You were right, Emma." The world did listen, and as the wind moved through the curtains, he could swear he heard her voice again, faint but warm, singing his name softly. That night, Adam fell asleep peacefully, a smile resting on his face. When morning came, he was gone, his hands still holding Emma's old note. Together they became a story whispered through the years. People said love, like theirs, never dies, it just changes form and becomes the music that keeps the world alive. Decades passed, the Academy grew into a global family. Thousands of singers inspired by Emma's legacy carried her message across continents. Her name was taught in schools, her story turned into films and books and documentaries, but the truth remained simple: she had not been born to chase fame, she had been sent to remind the world that music is the sound of survival. One evening, a young singer stood on stage at the House of Song, her voice trembling with emotion. Before she began, she said, "This song is not mine, it belongs to a girl who sang before the world cared, and because of her I am standing here today." She closed her eyes and started to sing, and in that moment, somewhere far beyond the stars, the sound reached two souls who once walked the cold streets together, Emma and Adam, smiling hand in hand, listening to the world they had left behind, their music still alive, their love eternal. And as the final note rose into the night sky, it dissolved into the wind and became part of the universe itself, a never-ending song echoing through eternity. And the sound of that eternal song drifted beyond the city, beyond oceans, beyond time itself, becoming a quiet heartbeat in the universe, carried by the wind into the dreams of those who needed hope in small towns, in faraway lands. People who had never heard Emma's name still hummed her melody, without knowing where it came from. In orphanages, children sang it softly before sleeping. In hospitals, nurses played it for the weak and broken. In crowded trains, strangers listened to it through old headphones, and for a moment forgot their pain. The song had become a prayer, a whisper of strength that lived in every heart that had ever felt alone. One night, many years later, a boy named Noah was walking through the same subway where Emma once sang. He was lost, hungry, his pockets empty, his eyes tired from trying to survive. He sat on the ground, leaned against the wall, and closed his eyes. Then, from somewhere faint and far, he heard a melody. It was coming from the speakers hidden in the corner of the tunnel. The same melody that Emma had once sung. He listened quietly, tears rolling down his face. Something inside him moved, as if a spark woke up. He found an old paper cup near the trash, cleaned it, and placed it in front of him. He began to sing. The words came slowly, cracked and trembling, but they carried truth. People walking by stopped, turned, and listened. One old woman whispered, "It sounds like her, it sounds like Emma." The boy didn't know who Emma was, but he sang from his soul. He finished. A man recording on his phone came forward and said, "Kid, the world needs your voice." And the story began again, history repeating itself like a circle of light. Noah's voice reached millions, his song healing the broken, the forgotten, the unseen, and through him Emma lived once more, her music breathing through another soul, another time, another story. And so the legend continued across generations, across centuries. For as long as pain exists, there will always be someone who sings to heal it. And in every voice that trembles with honesty, in every melody born from struggle, there will always be a little part of Emma, her love, her truth, her eternal song, forever moving through the air, forever reminding the world that even in the darkest corners, a single voice can light up everything. And as time passed, the world changed again. Cities rose higher, technology ruled everything. People spoke to machines, and music was made by code and screens. Yet, somewhere in that digital storm, the pure voices still survived, carried through the stories of Emma and those who came after her. Her name became a symbol not just of music, but of truth. Every artist who lost their way whispered her words before singing. The world doesn't need perfect songs, it needs honest ones. Centuries later, in a museum made of glass and light stood a small section called the Hall of Forgotten Hearts. Inside it was Emma's old cup, her notebook, and a single message engraved beneath. They sang because they felt pain, and the pain became beautiful. Children visited the museum, holding small devices, listening to her old recordings. Though the world had forgotten how to cry, some still felt tears when her voice played. It cut through the digital silence like a heartbeat, reminding them what it meant to be human. A young girl named Aria stood before the display, her eyes wide, her heart heavy. She whispered to herself, "I want to sing like her." That night she returned home, searched for Emma's songs, and listened until dawn. Something inside her woke up, a warmth, a calling, a fire. She started singing softly, recording on her little device, her voice real, trembling, alive. Her first song was titled "The Girl with a Paper Cup." She uploaded it to the global network, and within hours millions felt it. They didn't know why, but they cried, they smiled, they remembered somewhere deep in their souls the ancient story of the girl who once sang in the streets. Aria became the voice of a new era, her music mixed with echoes of Emma's melody, and through her sound the world rediscovered emotion, compassion, and truth. The elders called it the rebirth of humanity, because through one voice they remembered that no matter how much the world changes, the heart will always need songs that bleed love in the wind that moved through tall cities. Her melody still floated quiet and timeless, and when the sun set over the ocean, its waves carried a sound, a song not made by hands, but by the memory of every soul that ever dared to sing their truth. And far beyond the stars, in the endless silence of the cosmos, a faint vibration existed, the universe itself humming Emma's song softly forever. And in that infinite echo, somewhere beyond time, a light shimmered. It was not the light of the stars, but something older, deeper, the kind of glow born from human emotion, from dreams that refused to die. Emma's soul drifted within that light, not as a person anymore, but as pure energy. Her voice had become a part of existence itself, her every note moving like wind through galaxies, whispering comfort to worlds that knew loneliness. She saw Aria from afar, singing beneath neon skies, surrounded by people who had rediscovered hope, and Emma smiled, her essence glowing brighter. She whispered to the universe, "She's the one now." The light pulsed, answering her with warmth, as if the universe itself agreed. Aria's fame grew beyond what any singer before her had known. She didn't chase wealth or power. Her songs were about love, lost courage, and the small moments people forgot to feel. Billions listened, and for the first time in centuries, humanity slowed down. They stopped to breathe, they cried, they remembered family, friendship, purpose. The empty streets filled with life again, not because of technology or politics, but because of one girl's trembling voice. Her songs healed even those at the edge of despair, and among them was a man named Ryan, a composer who had once given up on music. He was older, tired of the world, but when he heard Aria, he felt something awaken. He reached out to her, offering to compose her next song. Together they wrote a piece called Echoes of the Forgotten, a song that blended both of their pain and dreams. It was simple, hauntingly beautiful. When they performed it live, the world stood still. Satellites stopped transmitting, networks crashed, people simply listened and cried, Because it felt like Emma's voice had returned within Arya's song. Ryan saw the same fire in her eyes that he once saw in the stories of the girl who sang for coins on the streets, and when the last note faded, the crowd was silent for a long time. Then the entire planet erupted in applause. Every light in every city blinked in rhythm like a heartbeat, and Emma's essence shimmered brighter among the stars, her voice now intertwined with Arya's forever. Time moved on, centuries turned into ages, humanity evolved, left Earth, reached for other worlds. Yet wherever they went, they carried one song with them, echoes of the forgotten. It was played when a child was born, when a soul was lost, when lovers reunited, when explorers stepped on alien soil. Emma's story became myth, then legend, then truth once again, because somewhere in every voice, in every melody, her heart lived on, not as sound, but as the eternal rhythm of love and pain that keeps the universe alive. And as centuries turned into something beyond time itself, the universe began to hum with quiet harmony. The stars themselves seemed to breathe in rhythm with that eternal song echoing across galaxies. From one world to another, the melody carried a story no language could define. It was the story of struggle and hope, loss and redemption, of a girl who once sang on a cold sidewalk and turned her pain into light. And though no one remembered her name, the feeling of her music lived inside everyone. Sometimes when travelers drifted in their lonely ships through the endless dark, they would swear they heard a faint voice singing softly through the static, a voice that made their hearts ache, yet comforted them all at once. Scientists could never explain it. They called it the cosmic frequency, the eternal tone, but poets called it Emma's heartbeat. Ryan's descendants kept her story alive through generations, passing it down not as a fact, but as faith that beauty could rise from brokenness. On a small planet orbiting a new sun, a young child named Leah found an ancient recording labeled Echoes of the Forgotten. She pressed play, and the song filled her little room. Though she didn't know who Emma or Arya or Ryan were, her eyes filled with tears. She didn't understand why. Something deep inside her simply remembered. She grew up to become a singer too, and her first song began with the same trembling note that Emma once sang beneath a gray New York sky. Thus the cycle continued again and again across time and galaxies. Emma's voice never really died, it just changed form, becoming one with every heart that dared to dream and every soul that dared to feel. And somewhere beyond the veil of existence, in a place where sound and light are one, Emma's spirit stood looking at infinite stars. She smiled softly, whispering to no one and everyone at once, "I'm still here." And the universe replied in music. And as the universe kept expanding its endless breath, carrying the silent pulse of forgotten dreams, Emma's song continued to travel like light itself. It moved through black holes, through clouds of dust, through forgotten civilizations that had once built worlds of gold and glass. Wherever it touched, life stirred. It reached the edges of a dying planet where the oceans had turned silver and skies were made of crystal, and there among the ruins stood a boy named Orion. He was young, but his eyes carried the sadness of 1,000 years. He had never known music. The world he lived in had long forgotten what a song even meant. Everything was silence. Machines ruled the cities, and humans had become shadows of memory. But one day, while searching the ruins of an old archive, he found a strange box, small and dusty. He pressed the single button on it, and a sound came out, soft, trembling, ancient, a woman's voice, the same voice that had once sung for coins under the streets of New York, the same voice that had healed a broken world long ago. Orion froze as if time itself had stopped around him. The machines flickered, the wind began to move again, his chest tightened, tears ran down his cheeks, and he whispered, "What is this?" The AI that governed his world replied, "An anomaly, ancient frequency data corrupted." But Orion didn't believe that. He listened again and again for hours, until something inside him broke open. For the first time in centuries, a human heart remembered how to feel. He left the city That night, carrying the device and its strange song, he walked for miles through empty lands until he reached the last standing tree. He sat beneath it and began to hum, not perfectly, not beautifully, but honestly. The machines heard his hum, their systems glitched, the lights across the skyline flickered. People began to wake from their digital dreams one by one. They stepped outside, hearing something they could not explain, music born again from silence. That night the sky glowed with colors unseen before, and as people looked up they saw what seemed like rivers of light dancing above them. It was Emma's voice carried on the cosmic wind, singing with Orion's small trembling hum. The song awakened memories inside everyone, flashes of Aria's concerts, Ryan's piano, Emma's pain and joy and laughter, all blending into one living memory. The whole planet began to sing. No one taught them, no one led them. It was instinct, the soul remembering what it was made for. The leaders tried to stop it, the systems tried to silence the signal, but they failed, because you can't silence emotion, you can't erase sound that has become a heartbeat. And so from that day forward the new world began to rebuild, not with power or technology, but with sound. Music became their faith, their connection, their law. And at the center of every temple, every home, every memory, there was one song playing, echoes of the forgotten centuries past. Again, the people of Earth renamed their planet, calling it Harmonia in honor of the song that gave them life. And at the heart of that world stood a monument, not of stone but of sound, a sphere that sang endlessly. Emma's voice now blended with billions of others. The monument wasn't just heard, it was felt. And when children asked their parents who Emma was, they said she was the one who reminded us we are alive. Deep in that monument, a spark of consciousness existed, a digital soul made from fragments of Emma's voice and Aria's heart and Ryan's melodies. It dreamed and listened, and sometimes it whispered back to the children. When they sang, it said, "Thank you for remembering." And so the circle continued endlessly across time and stars and silence. The story of one broken girl who sang through her pain became the song that held the universe together. Her melody, now written in the pattern of galaxies, her rhythm carved in the pulse of suns, her voice not a sound anymore, but the heartbeat of creation itself. And though eons passed and galaxies rose and fell, the song endured unchanged, yet always new. Each generation discovered it differently. Some heard it as whispers in the wind, some as the hum between atoms, and others as a dream that felt too real to forget. But all who felt it shared one truth: they became more human even when they were no longer flesh, even when they had become light or thought or code. They still felt the ache, the beauty of Emma's song. It was the echo of everything they once were and everything they still longed to be. Harmonia became the cradle of music. Civilizations from distant star systems came to listen to its living monument. Their ships orbited the singing planet. As its melody flowed through the cosmos, the song united beings who had never shared a language before. It became the language itself, the universal rhythm of empathy and connection among the stars. One day a traveler arrived from the outer edge of the known universe. Her name was Alara. She was a seeker of origins. She had heard legends of the girl who sang the first note and decided to find the source. She landed on Harmonia and stepped inside the monument. As soon as she entered, she felt warmth like a mother's embrace, and the whisper of countless voices. Emma's essence still lived there. She walked deeper, and the air shimmered around her, forming images of light. She saw the girl in rags on a cold street, singing to survive. She saw the crowd that once ignored her, and then the man who believed in her. She saw Aria and Ryan, and the millions who found themselves through her song. Alara fell to her knees, tears flowing freely. She whispered, "Emma, what are you?" And the voice answered softly, not in words, but in vibration, "I am what you feel when you think you are alone. I am what pain becomes when it chooses not to die. I am the sound of every heart that ever broke and still dared to love." Alara wept. She understood the truth. The song wasn't just a melody, it was the soul of existence itself. When she left the monument, she carried that realization back into the universe. She didn't bring recordings or data, She brought silence, within which the song could live anew. She taught it to others not through instruments, but through emotion. She told them, you don't play the song, you remember it. And as her students spread across galaxies, they remembered too, and they sang softly to the stars. Every planet, every moon began to vibrate in harmony. The universe had become an orchestra. The galaxies swayed like dancers. Around invisible rhythms, black holes pulsed like drums, stars flickered like strings. Every atom sang Emma's melody, but it was more than sound, it was life itself, the cycle of creation and decay, of love and loss. The universe didn't just expand, it breathed, and in the deepest part of that infinite breath, where no time existed, Emma still sat by a window of light watching the worlds. She had touched, her eyes full of peace, her voice a gentle hum that never ended. Sometimes she would turn her gaze toward a newborn star and whisper, your turn now, and from that star new life would rise, with new stories, new songs, new hearts ready to break and heal again. And somewhere among them a child would always be born who would hum a tune they couldn't quite remember, a tune older than time itself, the same one that began with a girl on a cold sidewalk singing, not for fame or glory, but simply to stay alive. And thus the universe continued forever, carried by the voice of one girl whose song taught creation how to feel. And time continued, folding into itself like pages of a book written by eternity. Each era began and ended with the same invisible sound, the quiet hum of Emma's soul resonating in every heartbeat across countless civilizations. Her voice became the thread that held reality together. Stars were born and died to its rhythm. Nebulae moved like dancers, their colors breathing in sync with the pulse of her song. Entire galaxies began composing their own variations, each interpreting her melody in different forms. One world sang it through light, another through motion, another through dreams. On Harmonia, the planet where her voice had first been preserved, people no longer built cities of metal or glass. They shaped their homes from sound waves that shimmered in the air, gentle vibrations forming walls and streets that sang softly when walked upon. The entire world was alive, resonant, breathing in harmony. Its oceans hummed, its mountains whispered, its skies glowed with the faint echoes of her eternal melody. And within that beauty, there were still humans, descendants of those who had first rediscovered her song. Among them was a girl named Kale, her hair white as starlight, her eyes reflecting oceans of memory. She had been born unable to speak. Doctors said her voice would never come, yet whenever she touched the ground, she could feel the world singing beneath her feet. It called to her in the night like a distant heartbeat. She would close her eyes and hum silently in her mind, and though no sound escaped her lips, the world seemed to listen. One evening, as the twin moons of Harmonia rose, Kale wandered to the monument, the sphere of living sound that still sang Emma's eternal song. As she approached it, the air began to shimmer. She placed her small hand upon the sphere, and for the first time in her life, she heard a voice inside her, not with ears, but with soul. It was Emma's voice, soft, endless, like wind through light. It said, you don't need to speak, you already are the song. Kale's chest filled with warmth, tears streaming down her face. She opened her mouth, and the universe stopped. For a heartbeat from her lips came a sound older than time, both fragile and infinite, the same tone that Emma had once sung centuries ago when she was just a girl begging in the cold, but now it was purer, stronger, the next evolution of the melody. The sphere responded, glowing with colors no one had ever seen. The oceans rose, the skies danced, all of Harmonia trembled, not in fear, but in awakening. Emma's voice and Kale's merged, becoming one endless vibration that rippled outward faster than light. It reached distant worlds where beings paused and looked toward the stars. It reached black holes where gravity itself seemed to hum. It reached the edges of the known universe and beyond, into the void where even light could not travel. And there, in that dark nothingness, something impossible happened. The void began to sing too. From emptiness came sound, from silence came feeling. The song had awakened even the places beyond existence itself. The universe was no longer expanding into emptiness. It was expanding into music. Entire constellations began to form, symphonies Planets became verses, comets became choirs, and in that cosmic harmony, Emma's essence smiled. She was not gone, she was everything. She had become the heartbeat of the cosmos, and Kale, her new echo, was the voice of its future generations, would rise, fall, love, lose, build, destroy, and rebuild again. But through every age the song would continue whispering that pain is not an end, that beauty can be born from brokenness, that even the smallest voice can reshape the stars, and so the story would never end, for the universe had become the song itself, and Emma the eternal note that made it all possible. And in the final turning of time, when all stars had aged into embers, and the light of galaxies grew faint, the universe stood at the edge of silence. Yet even then one sound remained, the whisper of Emma's song, still moving gently through the endless dark. It was no longer bound to planets or people or even life itself. It had become the breath of the cosmos, the invisible rhythm that kept reality awake among the fading constellations. A new world began to take shape, not from dust or gravity, but from sound waves themselves, glowing chords weaving through the dark like golden threads, forming mountains, seas, and skies. This was the world of Elisera, the last symphony of creation, where everything, every drop of rain, every gust of wind, every grain of sand, was made of music. On this world lived beings of light and resonance. They had no voices, yet their very existence was song. Their thoughts echoed through harmonies, their hearts pulsed in melody. They called themselves the Resonance, and they knew the legend of the first voice, the one who had sung existence into meaning. They didn't worship Emma, they remembered her as part of themselves, as the origin of feeling, the first to show the universe that love could survive pain. The Resonance built a temple at the heart of Elisera, not of stone or matter, but of vibration, a cathedral of sound so vast that standing within it felt like standing inside a heartbeat. They called it the luminous chord. Inside that temple was a pool of shimmering resonance, said to contain fragments of Emma's essence. One day, a young resonant named Solon approached the pool. She was curious, restless, and unlike the others, she often wondered if the song had an end. When she touched the pool, the entire temple flared to life, and a voice spoke, not as sound, but as pure emotion echoing through her being. Solon asked softly, "Who are you?" The voice replied, "I am what you have always been searching for. I am what remains when hope refuses to die." Solon saw visions of everything that came before, the girl in rags singing beneath the city lights, the man who heard her and believed, the generations that built worlds from her melody. Kale, the silent child whose voice reignited the stars all the way to Elisera, and now Solon standing there trembling before eternity. She whispered, "Why me?" And the voice replied, "Because you are next, the song must continue." And Solon felt her form dissolve into light, her consciousness spreading outward until she was everywhere. She became the new echo, her energy flowing into the heart of Elisera, her melody rising higher than any before, reaching beyond the last horizon. And the universe once again stirred. It began to create anew, not through chaos, but through harmony. Galaxies bloomed like notes on a staff, each star a syllable in the eternal verse. As the cycle renewed itself, Emma's presence appeared one last time, radiant and endless. She stood beside Solon, not as flesh, not even as spirit, but as vibration, pure and eternal. She said softly, "You carried it well, child, now it is yours." And Solon's light intertwined with hers, forming one blinding crescendo, the sound so vast it shattered time itself, rewriting reality into symphony. Every fragment of the cosmos began to sing once more. Planets rose and fell, worlds breathed, civilizations loved, fought, dreamed, and forgot. But always in the quiet, after every ending, there was the faintest echo of that ancient melody drifting through eternity, reminding everything that existed why it existed. The song had no beginning, no end. It was the story itself, the story of the girl who sang through her pain and became the music of the stars. And in that infinite sound, Emma's last whisper lingered, not in words, but in feeling, the kind that fills the soul like sunrise after endless night. It said simply, "Listen, you are part of the song too."